The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blackstone Industries' 42nd floor, as if the sky itself was demanding answers. Alexander Xander Blackstone stood motionless, his tailored charcoal suit reflecting the lightning that split the Manhattan skyline. His phone buzzed incessantly, 17 missed calls from his mother, each one a ticking bomb in his perfectly orchestrated life. "Sir?" His assistant's voice cracked through the intercom. "Your mother called again. She says if you don't bring a girlfriend to your grandfather's memorial weekend, she'll personally arrange your marriage to Senator Morrison's daughter." Xander's jaw clenched. The Morrison girl, plastic surgery, fake laugh, and a trust fund that screamed desperation. His grandfather's memorial was supposed to honor the man who built their empire, not become a matchmaking circus. But Eleanor, Blackstone never made empty threats. 23 floors below, Scarlett Chen was having her own crisis. The coffee shop's espresso machine hissed its final breath just as the morning rush hit. Her philosophy degree hanging on the wall seemed to mock her as steam filled the cramped space behind the counter. "Another machine breakdown?" asked Jake, her co-worker, dodging flying coffee grounds. "Third one this month," Scarlett muttered, her dark ponytail escaping its band as she wrestled with ancient equipment. "I swear this place is cursed." The door chimed, and she looked up to see trouble walking in. 6 feet of expensive cologne and the kind of confidence that came with never hearing the word no. His eyes scanned the chaos with amusement. "Rough morning?" Xander asked, stepping over a puddle of spilled milk. "You could say that." Scarlett wiped her hands on her apron, leaving streaks of coffee grounds. "What can I get you?" Fair warning, the espresso machine just declared war on humanity. Something in her honesty made him pause. Most people stammered around him once they recognized the Blackstone name. She just looked exhausted and slightly annoyed that he was adding to her problems. "Actually," he said, "an idea, crystallizing. I have a proposition that might solve both our problems." Scarlett raised an eyebrow. "Unless you're a licensed coffee machine repair technician, I doubt it." "Better. I'm a millionaire in need of a fake girlfriend for one weekend." The words hung in the air like steam from the broken machine. Scarlett blinked twice, then laughed, a genuine sound that caught Xander off guard. "Did you just proposition me with the worst pickup line in Manhattan history?" "I'm serious." He pulled out his business card. "One weekend at my family's estate in the Hamptons, all expenses paid plus $50,000. You pretend to be madly in love with me, I avoid an arranged marriage, and you can buy a fleet of new coffee machines." Scarlett stared at the card. Alexander Blackstone, CEO, the same Blackstone whose family owned half of Manhattan's skyline. Her student loans flashed before her eyes like a financial horror movie. "This is insane," she whispered. "Probably," Xander agreed. "But my mother expects me to bring someone special to my grandfather's memorial weekend. Someone real, not another society clone. You're perfect." "I serve coffee for a living and have paint under my fingernails from art class. How exactly am I perfect for your world?" "Because you're not trying to be." His expression softened. "Look, I know it sounds crazy, but I'm desperate. One weekend, professional arrangement. You get $50,000, I get my freedom." The broken espresso machine chose that moment to emit a final dramatic wheeze before going completely silent. Scarlett looked at it, then at the business card, then at the stranger who just offered her more money than she'd see in 2 years of coffee slinging. "50,000? She asked quietly. "Plus a complete wardrobe, jewelry, everything you'd need. Think of it as method acting." Scarlett's mind raced. Her art supplies, student loans, maybe even a real apartment instead of the shoebox she shared. With 3 roommates. It was insane. It was desperate. It was... "When do we leave?" she heard herself saying. Xander's smile was worth more than the $50,000. "Friday at noon. My driver will pick you up." As he walked away, Scarlett realized she'd just agreed to the most ridiculous thing in her 26 years of life. But watching him disappear into the storm outside, she couldn't shake the feeling that this weekend would change everything. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean for whatever came next. Friday morning arrived with the subtlety of a champagne cork popping. Scarlett stood in her cramped bathroom, staring at her reflection and wondering if 48 hours was enough time to question every life decision that led her here. Her phone buzzed. Car arrives in 20 minutes. Don't overthink it. X. Don't overthink it? She was about to pretend to be in love with a millionaire she'd met exactly once, in front of people who probably had their own Wikipedia pages. The black Mercedes that pulled up outside her building looked like it cost more than her annual rent. The driver, a distinguished man named James, treated her like royalty despite her nervous rambling about traffic patterns and weather predictions. "Mr. Blackstone is waiting at the penthouse, Miss Chen," James said, navigating through Manhattan with the precision of a Formula One driver. He mentioned something about preparation. Preparation turned out to be Xander's penthouse transformed into a war room of romance. A woman with silver hair and the posture of a ballet dancer stood beside racks of designer dresses, while a man with perfectly sculpted eyebrows arranged jewelry boxes like battle formations. "Scarlett," Xander appeared from the kitchen looking unfairly handsome in dark jeans and a white button-down. "Meet Vivian, my stylist, and Marcus, who works miracles with accessories. They're going to help us sell this whole madly in love thing." "Darling," Vivian circled Scarlett like a fashion vulture, "you have excellent bone structure, but we need to elevate the entire presentation. What's your relationship with heels?" "Complicated," Scarlett admitted. "We're not exactly on speaking terms." Marcus laughed, a sound like tinkling crystal. "Honey, by Sunday night, you'll be speaking fluent stiletto." What followed was 3 hours of the most intense makeover of Scarlett's life. Vivian draped her in silk dresses that cost more than most people's cars, while Marcus explained the difference between old money subtle and new money flashy jewelry. "Remember," Xander coached from the couch, occasionally glancing up from his laptop, "my family has been together since college. We met at a gallery opening. You're an artist, which explains your unique perspective on fashion." "Unique?" Scarlett emerged from behind a changing screen wearing a midnight blue dress that made her feel like expensive wine. "Is that rich people speak for fashion disaster?" The words died when she saw Xander's expression. He'd gone completely still, laptop forgotten, staring at her like she'd just solved world hunger while looking effortlessly elegant. "You look," he started, then cleared his throat. "That dress is perfect." Vivian smirked knowingly. The midnight blue brings out her eyes, very romantic for evening dinners. "Speaking of romantic," Marcus interrupted, producing a velvet box, "we need to discuss physical affection. How comfortable are you two with proximity?" Scarlett and Xander exchanged glances. They hadn't exactly covered hand-holding logistics in their coffee shop negotiation. "We should probably practice," Xander said practically. "My cousin David has a sixth sense for fake relationships. He'll be watching for inconsistencies." "Practice what, exactly?" Scarlett asked, though the flutter in her stomach suggested she already knew. "This." Xander stood and crossed to her, stopping just close enough that she caught his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made her want to lean closer. "May I?" At her nod, he took her hand, interlacing their fingers with surprising gentleness. His thumb traced across her knuckles, and Scarlett wondered if her accelerated heartbeat was audible to everyone in the room. "Good," Vivian nodded approvingly. "Natural chemistry is impossible to fake. Now, Scarlett, when he touches your back, lean into him slightly. Xander, protective gestures work well. Hand on the small of her back, that sort of thing." They spent the next hour choreographing casual intimacy. Scarlett learned that Xander's laugh was contagious when he was relaxed, and that he had a small scar above his left eyebrow from childhood adventures. Xander discovered that Scarlett gestured wildly when passionate about something, and that she had a habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when nervous. "One more thing," Marcus said as they wrapped up. "The story of how you fell in love. Make it specific, emotional, believable." Xander and Scarlett looked at each other. In all their practical planning, they'd forgotten the most important detail. "We were caught in a rainstorm, Scarlett said suddenly. After the gallery opening, Xander gave me his jacket and we took shelter in this tiny bookstore cafe. We talked for hours about art, philosophy, dreams we'd never told anyone. And, Vivian prompted. And I realized, Xander continued seamlessly, his eyes never leaving Scarlett's face, that I'd found someone who saw the world differently than anyone I'd ever met. Someone real. The room fell silent. Marcus dabbed at his eyes with a tissue. That, he whispered, is exactly how you fall in love. As evening approached and final preparations concluded, Scarlett found herself standing on Xander's balcony, wearing a fortune in borrowed clothes and feeling like she was about to step into someone else's life. Having second thoughts, Xander joined her, offering a glass of wine. Seventh or eighth thoughts, actually, she admitted. Your family is going to see right through this. Maybe, he said quietly. But for what it's worth, I don't think I've ever had a better practice girlfriend. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the city lights blurred around them. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled 8 times, marking the end of Scarlett Chen's ordinary life and the beginning of something extraordinary. Tomorrow, they would drive to the Hamptons. Tonight, they were just 2 people pretending not to notice that their fake relationship was starting to feel surprisingly real. The Blackstone estate rose from the Hamptons coastline like something from a Gothic romance novel. All weathered stone, ivy-covered walls, and windows that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. Scarlett pressed her face to the car window as they approached through gates that probably cost more than most houses. It's intimidating, she breathed, watching peacocks strut across manicured lawns. Wait until you meet my family, Xander muttered, his easy confidence from the city replaced by tension that made his jaw tight. Fair warning, my mother has the subtlety of a FBI interrogation, my cousin David thinks he's a modern-day Sherlock Holmes, and my Aunt Patricia believes everyone is after the family money. Are they wrong about that last part? Scarlett asked, attempting lightness. In your case? Technically, yes. His smile was rueful. You're only after 50,000, not 50 million. The car crunched to a stop on gravel that sparkled like crushed diamonds. Before Scarlett could take a steadying breath, the massive front doors burst open and a woman emerged who could only be Eleanor Blackstone. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing pearls that caught the afternoon light, and an expression of barely contained curiosity. Alexander, she called, gliding down the stone steps with the grace of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. And this must be the mysterious girlfriend we've heard absolutely nothing about. Xander stepped out and immediately moved to Scarlett's side of the car, opening her door with practiced chivalry. As she emerged, he placed his hand on the small of her back, exactly as they'd practiced, and she felt the warmth of his palm through the silk of her dress. Mother, I'd like you to meet Scarlett Chen, Xander said, his voice carrying new formality. Scarlett, my mother, Eleanor Blackstone. Mrs. Blackstone. Scarlett extended her hand, grateful for Marcus's crash course in proper handshake etiquette. Thank you for including me in such an important family weekend. Eleanor's handshake was firm, her blue eyes, so like Xander's, assessing every detail from Scarlett's designer shoes to her carefully styled hair. Please call me Eleanor. We're practically family now, aren't we? The loaded question hung in the air like expensive perfume. Scarlett felt Xander's thumb trace a reassuring circle on her back. The house is incredible, Scarlett said, deflecting, with genuine admiration. Xander mentioned your family has owned it for generations? Since 1892, Eleanor beamed, clearly pleased by the interest. Xander's great-great-grandfather built it as a summer retreat. Of course, it's been extensively renovated. We added the wine cellar in the 70s and the art gallery in the 90s. More family members appeared as if summoned by invisible bells. David Blackstone emerged first, tall, lean, with the kind of calculated casualness that screamed Ivy League education and trust fund confidence. Behind him came Patricia and her husband George, followed by a parade of cousins, spouses, and what appeared to be several family friends who looked like they'd stepped from the pages of Architectural Digest. "So you're the one who's captured our Xander's heart," David said, his smile sharp as champagne flutes. "Fascinating. Tell me, how exactly did you two meet?" Scarlett felt 14 pairs of eyes focus on her like spotlights. This was it. Their first real test. "At a gallery opening in Soho," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Xander was standing in front of this abstract piece looking completely lost. I was not lost," Xander protested with mock indignation, falling into their rehearsed rhythm. "I was contemplating the artistic merit." "You were tilting your head like a confused golden retriever," Scarlett laughed, and the sound drew genuine chuckles from the assembled crowd. "So I took pity on you and explained why the artist used those particular color combinations. And then it started raining," Xander continued, his eyes finding hers. "We took shelter in this tiny bookstore, Café, where you proceeded to order the most complicated coffee drink I'd ever heard," Scarlett finished. "Triple shot espresso with oat milk, a dash of cinnamon and honey, but only if it was locally sourced." "I have standards," Xander shrugged, and Patricia actually smiled. "How long ago was this?" Eleanor asked, her detective mode clearly activated. 6 months, they said simultaneously, then looked at each other with the kind of surprised delight that couldn't be faked. David's eyes narrowed slightly, but before he could probe further, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A young woman with platinum blonde hair and a dress that cost more than most cars swept through the doors, trailing designer luggage and an air of barely contained hysteria. "I'm sorry I'm late," she announced to no one in particular. "Traffic was absolutely murderous, and my massage therapist was running behind, and you know how I get when my chakras aren't properly aligned before family gatherings." Eleanor's smile became glacial. "Everyone, you remember Senator Morrison's daughter, Brittany." Scarlett felt Xander tense beside her. So this was the woman his mother had threatened to arrange a marriage with. All bleached teeth, expensive extensions, and the kind of laugh that could shatter crystal. "Xander!" Brittany launched herself at him like a guided missile in stilettos. "I've missed you so much. When Mommy told me about this weekend, I just knew we needed to reconnect. It's been far too long since we've had a proper chat about our future." The awkwardness was so thick you could cut it with Eleanor's pearl-handled letter opener. Scarlett watched Xander's face cycle through several expressions before settling on polite panic. "Brittany," he said carefully, gently extracting himself from her embrace. "I'd like you to meet my girlfriend, Scarlett." Brittany's smile faltered for exactly 1 second before blazing back to full wattage. "Girlfriend? How unexpected. I don't recall hearing about any girlfriend." "We prefer to keep our private life private," Scarlett said smoothly, stepping closer to Xander. "I hope you understand." "Of course." Brittany's laugh was like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Though I have to say you look familiar. Have we met? You look like someone who might work in service industry." The insult was delivered with such saccharine sweetness that it took a moment to register. Scarlett felt her cheeks warm, but before she could respond, Xander's arm tightened around her waist. "Scarlett is a talented artist," he said, his voice carrying a warning that made David's eyebrows rise. "She's had several gallery showings in Manhattan." "How artistic," Brittany said, managing to make creativity sound like a communicable disease. Eleanor clapped her hands together. "Well, shall we get everyone settled? Dinner is at 8, and I'm sure you'll all want to freshen up. Xander, you and Scarlett are in the blue room." As the crowd dispersed, Scarlett found herself walking through hallways lined with portraits of stern-faced Blackstones, who seemed to judge her every step. The blue room turned out to be a suite larger than her entire apartment, with a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a museum and windows overlooking the ocean. "One bed," Scarlett observed, her voice carefully neutral. "I can sleep on the couch," Xander said quickly. "Or I can request another room." "It's fine," she interrupted, surprised by her own words. We're supposed to be madly in love, remember? Separate rooms might raise questions. They stood there for a moment, the implications hanging between them like morning mist. Outside, seagulls cried over the crash of waves, and Scarlett realized that somewhere between the makeover and the family introductions, this had stopped feeling like a business arrangement. You handled Brittany perfectly, Xander said finally. I'm sorry she was rude. She's territorial. About you? About everything. He moved to the window, hands shoved in his pockets. My mother's been trying to matchmake us since prep school. Brittany sees it as a done deal. And you? Xander turned back to her, his expression serious. I'd rather marry the peacocks on the lawn. Scarlett laughed despite herself. Good to know I rank above peacocks in your preferences. Considerably above peacocks, he said softly, and something in his voice made her breath catch. A knock interrupted the moment. Dinner in 30 minutes. Eleanor's voice carried through the door. Don't be late. As they prepared for their first family dinner, Scarlett caught her reflection in the antique mirror and barely recognized herself. In designer clothes, with professional makeup and jewelry that sparkled like captured starlight, she looked like she belonged in this world. The question was, did she want to? The dining room belonged in a museum. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across mahogany that could house a small village, while oil paintings of deceased Blackstones watched the proceedings with painted disapproval. 22 Place. Settings sparkled like a jewelry store explosion, and Scarlett mentally cataloged at least 4 different types of forks. Scarlett, darling, you simply must sit next to me, Eleanor commanded, patting the chair to her right. I want to hear everything about your art. Xander squeezed her hand before they separated, a gesture that felt less like performance and more like reassurance. Across the table, Brittany had somehow maneuvered herself directly across from Xander, her décolletage apparently designed for maximum strategic advantage. So, Scarlett, David began as uniformed servers appeared with the first course. Xander mentioned you've had gallery showings. Which galleries specifically? The question hung like a sword over her head. Marcus had briefed her on some Manhattan galleries, but David's tone suggested he already knew she was lying. Smaller venues mostly, she said carefully, tasting what appeared to be soup made from liquid gold. The Meridian Gallery in Chelsea, a group show at the Hartwell Space in Brooklyn. Ah, the Meridian, Patricia chimed in. George and I were there for the Pemberton retrospective last month. Beautiful space. Did you know the curator, Amanda Voss? Scarlett's heart stopped. She'd made up the gallery name, banking on the vastness of New York's art scene. Now she was trapped in her own lie, 22 pairs of eyes waiting for her response. Amanda's wonderful, she managed, praying no one could hear her pulse thundering. Very supportive of emerging artists. Indeed, Patricia smiled, though I thought her name was Amanda Vance, not Voss. The correction landed like a guillotine blade. Scarlett felt heat creep up her neck as she realized her mistake. Across the table, Brittany's smile turned predatory. Easy mistake, Xander interjected smoothly. Amanda changed her name professionally after her divorce. Scarlett knew her before that. His rescue was so effortless that Scarlett almost believed it herself. She shot him a grateful glance, which he answered with the smallest wink. How romantic that you know such intimate details about gallery curators, Brittany purred. It shows how involved you are in Scarlett's career. I'm very involved in everything about Scarlett, Xander replied, his voice carrying an edge that made several family members exchange glances. Eleanor leaned forward, her maternal radar clearly pinging. You know, in all my years of marriage, to Xander's father, I learned that the strongest relationships are built on complete honesty. Wouldn't you agree, Scarlett? The question felt loaded with implications. Scarlett took a sip of wine, something that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and chose her words carefully. I think honesty is crucial, she said. But I also think timing matters. Some truths are worth waiting for the right moment. Cryptic, David observed. Are there truths you're waiting to share with us, Scarlett? Before she could answer, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went pale. "Excuse me," she said, rising abruptly. "I need to take this call." She disappeared toward the terrace, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Through the French doors, they could see her pacing, one hand pressed to her ear, her body language screaming crisis. "Everything all right?" George asked when Eleanor returned 10 minutes later, her composure carefully reconstructed, but her eyes troubled. "Family business," Eleanor said tersely. "Nothing that can't wait until Monday." But Scarlett caught the way Xander's jaw tightened, the concerned glance he shot his mother. Whatever that call had been about, it wasn't routine business. "Well," Brittany announced, clearly sensing an opportunity to redirect attention. "Speaking of family business, I have exciting news. Daddy's considering a run for governor, and he specifically mentioned wanting the Blackstone family's support." The political implications hung heavy as the main course arrived, some sort of fish that had probably been swimming in French waters that morning. Scarlett noticed how the conversation shifted around potential political alliances, campaign contributions, and social obligations. "Of course," Brittany continued, "these kinds of political partnerships work best when families are connected. Don't you think, Xander?" "I think," Xander said deliberately, "that political decisions should be based on policy, not personal relationships." "How idealistic," Brittany laughed. "Though I suppose that's what happens when you don't understand how these things really work." The comment was aimed at Scarlett like a poison arrow. Before Xander could respond, Scarlett set down her fork with deliberate calm. "You're right," she said, meeting Brittany's gaze directly. "I don't understand how political dynasties work. I grew up believing that positions of power should be earned through merit, not inherited through marriage alliances." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Patricia's eyebrows rose while David's mouth twitched with what might have been approval. "How refreshing," Eleanor said dryly, returning to her seat. "A young person with principles." "Principles are lovely," Brittany replied sweetly, "until they meet reality. Don't you find that the real world requires compromise?" "Some compromises cost too much," Scarlett replied, thinking about her own situation with uncomfortable clarity. Xander reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I love that about you," he said quietly. "You never compromise who you are." The words hit Scarlett like a physical blow. Here she was, wearing borrowed clothes, living a borrowed life, and pretending to be someone she wasn't, the very definition of compromising who she was. The irony was so sharp it took her breath away. "How did you know?" Patricia asked suddenly. "That you were in love, I mean. Was there a moment when you just knew?" Scarlett and Xander looked at each other across the expanse of crystal and china. The question demanded honesty in a conversation built on lies. "It wasn't a moment," Xander said slowly, his eyes never leaving Scarlett's face. "It was a realization. I kept finding excuses to talk to her, to hear her laugh. I started measuring my days by whether I'd see her or not. And I realized," Scarlett continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "that he saw me. Not what I could become or what I should be, but exactly who I am. That's rare." The dining room had gone completely silent except for the distant crash of waves. Even Brittany seemed stunned by the raw emotion in their voices. "That's beautiful," Eleanor said softly, and for the first time that evening her smile seemed completely genuine. As dessert arrived, some architectural marvel involving chocolate and gold leaf, the conversation drifted to safer topics. But Scarlett couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted during dinner. The lines between performance and reality were blurring in ways that terrified her. Later, as they made their way back to the blue room, Xander caught her, elbow gently. "You were incredible tonight," he said. "The way you handled Brittany, the political discussion, you held your own against people who've been playing these games their entire lives." "I nearly blew our cover with the gallery thing," Scarlett protested. "But you didn't. We're a team, remember?" They reached their door and Scarlett realized she was reluctant to end the evening. Despite the stress, Despite the lies, she'd felt more alive during that dinner than she had in months. "Xander?" she said as he reached for the door handle. "About what you said at dinner, about not compromising who I am?" He turned to face her fully. "What about it? Isn't that exactly what I'm doing? This whole weekend I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." Xander was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the hallway's soft lighting. "Maybe," he said finally, "or maybe you're discovering who you could be." The words followed them into the room, settling between them like a challenge and a promise all at once. At 2:47 a.m., Scarlett gave up on sleep. The four-poster bed was luxurious enough to house royalty, but her mind raced like a hamster on espresso. Xander had been true to his word about the couch, though she'd caught him tossing and turning for hours before his breathing finally evened out. She slipped from beneath Egyptian cotton sheets and padded to the French doors leading to their private balcony. The ocean stretched endlessly under a full moon, its surface painted silver with reflected light. She wrapped herself in the silk robe Vivian had provided and stepped outside, breathing in salt air that tasted like freedom. "Can't sleep either?" Scarlett spun to find Xander emerging from the shadows, wearing only pajama pants and an expression of gentle concern. Even disheveled from attempted sleep, he looked like he'd stepped from the pages of a magazine. "I keep thinking about dinner," she admitted, turning back to the ocean. "About what your mother said about honesty, and what I said about compromise. The irony is almost painful." "Is it, though?" Xander moved to stand beside her at the railing, close enough that she caught his warmth in the cool night air. "Ironic, I mean. I'm literally living a lie, Xander. I'm wearing clothes that cost more than my car, pretending to be cultured and sophisticated when 3 days ago, my biggest decision was whether to splurge on name-brand coffee filters. And yet tonight at dinner, you were the most authentic person in that room." She turned to study his profile, moonlight carving shadows across his features. "How can you say that? I made up gallery names and pretended to understand wine pairings. But when Brittany attacked your principles, you didn't back down. When she tried to make you feel small, you stood your ground. When Patricia asked about love..." He paused, his hands gripping the railing. "What you said wasn't performance, Scarlett. At least, it didn't feel like performance." The admission hung between them like morning mist. Scarlett's heart did something complicated against her ribs. "Xander, I know this is crazy," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know we have a contract, an arrangement, but sitting across from you tonight, watching you handle my family with more grace than people who've been born to this world." He was interrupted by the sound of voices drifting up from below. They both leaned forward to peer over the balcony, railing, where Eleanor paced the garden terrace with her phone pressed to her ear, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. "I don't care what the board thinks," Eleanor's voice carried clearly in the still air. "We cannot let the Morrison family gain any more influence over our holdings. If Brittany marries into this family, Senator Morrison will have a direct line to our business decisions." Scarlett and Xander exchanged shocked glances. Below them, Eleanor continued her heated conversation. "The pharmaceutical division is already vulnerable after the FDA investigation. We need Alexander married to someone with no political connections, no family agendas, someone who can't be used against us." "Oh my God," Scarlett breathed, the pieces clicking into place. "This isn't about your happiness at all, it's about protecting the company." Xander's face had gone stone cold in the moonlight. "She's using me, using us." The whole bring a girlfriend ultimatum wasn't about grandchildren or settling down, it was about blocking the Morrison political alliance. Eleanor's voice rose sharply below them. "Find out everything you can about this Scarlett Chen. I don't care if you have to hire private investigators. If she's clean, if she has no connections to our competitors or the Morrison family, then she might be exactly what we need." The words hit Scarlett like a physical blow. She wasn't just playing a role in Xander's personal drama. She was an unwitting pawn in corporate warfare. "I need to go," she whispered, backing away from the railing. "Scarlett, wait." But she was already moving, slipping back through the French doors and grabbing clothes from the wardrobe. Her hands shook as she pulled on jeans and a sweater. "Where are you going?" Xander followed her inside, his voice urgent. "I can't do this," she said, stuffing her few personal belongings into her small overnight bag. "This isn't just about pretending to be your girlfriend anymore. Your mother is having me investigated. She's planning to use me as some kind of corporate shield." Then we tell her the truth. We explain that this is fake, that you're not actually. And then what? Scarlett spun to face him, tears threatening. "You think she'll just let this go? You think the Morrison family won't see this as the perfect opportunity to destroy your reputation? Billionaire's son caught in elaborate dating hoax. Can you imagine the headlines?" Xander ran both hands through his hair, the careful composure he'd maintained all weekend finally cracking. "So what's your solution? You just disappear, leave me to face the music alone?" "You'll figure it out. Rich people always do." The bitter words were out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted the hurt that flashed across his face. "Is that really what you think of me?" he asked quietly. "That I'm just another entitled rich boy who'll throw money at problems until they disappear?" Scarlett sank onto the edge of the bed, her overnight bag clutched in her lap like armor. "I don't know what to think anymore. 3 days ago, you were a stranger offering me money to play dress-up. Now I'm caught in corporate espionage and my fake boyfriend is looking at me like—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Like what?" "Like this means something to you." Xander crossed the room slowly, as if approaching a spooked animal. When he reached her, he knelt down so they were eye level. "It does mean something to me," he said simply. "More than it should. More than I planned." "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Scarlett whispered. "The lines are getting blurred. I'm starting to forget what's real and what's performance. Maybe that's because the best parts were never performance." Before she could respond, a soft knock echoed through the room. They both froze. "Xander?" Eleanor's voice called through the door. "I saw lights on. Is everything all right?" Panic flashed across both their faces. Scarlett was half-dressed, clearly preparing to leave, with her bag packed and tears threatening to spill. "Just a moment, Mother," Xander called back, then whispered urgently to Scarlett. "Please, don't run. Not yet. Give me until tomorrow evening to figure this out. Xander, one more day, please. I know I have no right to ask, but I'm asking anyway." The vulnerability in his voice undid her. Against every instinct screaming at her to flee, Scarlett found herself nodding. "Alexander?" Eleanor's voice carried a note of suspicion. "Coming," he called, then looked back at Scarlett. "Trust me?" She wanted to say no. She wanted to tell him that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, that fairy tales didn't exist for girls like her. Instead, she found herself whispering, "One more day." Xander opened the door to find Eleanor standing in the hallway, her expression sharp with concern and something that might have been calculation. "I thought I heard voices," she said, peering past him into the room. "Scarlett had a nightmare," Xander said smoothly, "about her father. She lost him last year, and sometimes the grief hits unexpectedly." It wasn't entirely a lie. Scarlett had mentioned her father's death during their practice sessions, but hearing Xander use her real pain to protect their fake relationship felt like another small betrayal. "How terrible," Eleanor murmured, though her eyes continued scanning the room. "Perhaps she'd feel better with some warm milk. I could have the kitchen prepare something." "That's very kind, but she's finally settled back to sleep," Xander replied. "We should all try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." After Eleanor retreated, Xander closed the door and leaned against it, looking suddenly exhausted. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying." Scarlett unpacked her bag with mechanical movements, hanging the sweater back in the wardrobe and placing her jeans in the drawer. But as she climbed back into the enormous bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just agreed to something far more dangerous than another day of pretense. Outside, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to human hearts breaking and mending in the moonlight. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of golden light that made everything look like a painting. Scarlett woke to find Xander already gone from the couch, though a steaming cup of coffee and a handwritten note waited on the nightstand. Gone for a walk to clear my head. Back before breakfast. We'll figure this out together. X. The together part sent warmth spiraling through her chest, followed immediately by panic. She was falling for him. Had already fallen if she was honest, and that hadn't been part of any contract. Breakfast was a tense affair. Eleanor presided over the meal with the efficiency of a general planning battle strategy, while Brittany monopolized conversation about her father's political aspirations. David watched everything with the intensity of a cat stalking prey, and Scarlett felt like she was walking through a minefield wearing tap shoes. "I thought we might take a family photo this afternoon," Eleanor announced as servers cleared the breakfast dishes. "For the memorial service program. It would be lovely to include Scarlett, of course, if she's planning to be part of our family. Long term." The loaded question hung in the air like a challenge. Across the table, Brittany's smile turned predatory. "What a wonderful idea," she purred. "Though I suppose it depends on how serious things really are between you two. It would be awkward to include someone in family photos if the relationship isn't permanent." "Actually," David interjected, setting down his coffee cup with deliberate precision, "that raises an interesting point. Scarlett, I took the liberty of looking into your background last night." Scarlett's blood turned to ice. Beside her, Xander went completely still. "I couldn't find any record of you at the Meridian Gallery," David continued conversationally. "In fact, the Meridian Gallery closed 3 years ago after a money laundering scandal. Fascinating, don't you think?" The silence that followed was deafening. Scarlett could hear her own heartbeat, the distant crash of waves, the tick of an antique clock that suddenly sounded like a countdown timer. "David?" Xander's voice carried a warning that made several family members shift uncomfortably. "I'm simply curious," David said, his tone innocent as poisoned honey. "Because I also discovered that Scarlett works at a coffee shop in Manhattan, the Daily Grind, to be specific. Not exactly the background one would expect for someone with gallery connections." Eleanor's face had gone perfectly blank, the expression of someone reassessing everything they thought they knew. Brittany practically vibrated with vindicated triumph. "Well," Brittany said sweetly, "this is certainly illuminating." Scarlett felt 22 pairs of eyes boring into her, waiting for explanations that would only make everything worse. The carefully constructed facade of the weekend was crumbling around her like a house of cards in a hurricane. "You're right," she said quietly, surprising everyone by not attempting denial. "I do work at a coffee shop. I've never had a gallery showing. I don't know anything about wine pairings or which fork to use for the fish course." "Scarlett," Xander started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish." She stood, her designer dress suddenly feeling like a costume from a play she no longer wanted to perform. "I met Xander exactly once before this weekend, when he offered me money to pretend to be his girlfriend. I said yes because I have student loans and broken dreams and a checking account that laughs at me." Gasps echoed around the table. Eleanor's face had progressed from blank to thunderous. "But here's what I've learned this weekend," Scarlett continued, her voice growing stronger. "I've learned that some of you judge people based on their bank accounts rather than their character. I've learned that political alliances matter more than personal happiness. And I've learned that honesty is apparently a revolutionary concept in this family." "How dare you?" Brittany began, but Scarlett wasn't finished. "I've also learned that your son, this incredible, complicated, genuine man, has spent his entire life being treated like a chess piece in other people's games, including by his own mother." Eleanor shot to her feet. "That is quite enough." "Is it?" Scarlett turned to face her directly. "Because last night I heard you on the phone talking about investigating me, about using me as protection against the Morrison family's political influence. You didn't want Xander to find love. You wanted him to find a weapon." The accusation landed like a bomb in the pristine dining room. Eleanor's composure cracked visibly. You were eavesdropping? I was trying to get some air because I felt guilty about lying to you, Scarlett shot back. Imagine my surprise when I discovered you were playing games that made my little deception look like amateur hour. Xander stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Is it true, Mother? Was this all about blocking Brittany's family? Eleanor's silence was answer enough. Around the table, family members exchanged uncomfortable glances while Brittany's face cycled through several shades of mortification. Unbelievable, Xander breathed. You manipulated both of us. You threatened me with an arranged marriage, and you were prepared to use Scarlett as a corporate pawn. I was protecting our family's interests, Eleanor said stiffly. Something you seem incapable of understanding. Our family's interests? Xander's laugh was bitter. What about my interests? What about my right to choose my own life? You're being dramatic. No, Mother, I'm being honest. For the first time in my adult life, I'm being completely honest. He turned to Scarlett, his blue eyes blazing with something that made her breath catch. And the honest truth is that this weekend was supposed to be fake, but somewhere between the practice sessions and the family dinners and the midnight conversations, it became the most real thing in my life. Scarlett's heart stopped entirely. Around them, the Blackstone family sat frozen like characters in a tableau. I don't care that you work at a coffee shop, Xander continued, taking a step toward her. I don't care that you've never owned a designer dress or attended a gallery opening. I care that you make me laugh. I care that you see through all the pretense and like me anyway. I care that you're brave enough to tell my family exactly what you think of their games. Xander, Scarlett whispered, tears threatening to spill. I know this wasn't part of our deal, he said softly. I know I'm changing the rules at the last minute, but I'm asking you to consider a new arrangement. What kind of arrangement? The kind where we skip the pretending and try the real thing. The words hung in the air like a proposal, beautiful and terrifying and completely impossible. I can't, Scarlett said, her voice breaking. Look around, Xander, this is your world. Mansions and family politics and traditions that go back centuries. I serve coffee and paint watercolors in my spare time and use coupons at the grocery store. So we're from different planets. This weekend was beautiful, but it was also fantasy. Real life doesn't work like this. Doesn't it? Xander moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. Because the woman who stood up to my family just now, that was real. The conversations we had at 3 in the morning, those were real. The way you make me want to be better than I am, that's real. Eleanor cleared her throat loudly. If you're quite finished with this theatrical display, we are finished, Xander said, turning to face his family. All of us. Scarlett's right. This family has confused manipulation with love for so long that we've forgotten the difference. But I'm done playing along. He pulled out his phone and dialed quickly. James, please bring the car around. Miss Chen, and I will be leaving immediately. Xander, be reasonable, Eleanor began. I am being reasonable. For the first time in my life. He offered Scarlett his arm. Shall we? An hour later, they sat in the back of the Mercedes as it wound through the Hamptons countryside, both of them still in shock from the morning's revelations. Scarlett had changed back into her own clothes, jeans and a simple blouse that cost 1/10 of the designer outfit, and felt like herself again for the first time in days. So, she said finally, that went well. Xander laughed, a sound of pure relief. I've been waiting my entire adult life to tell my family exactly what I thought of their schemes. Thank you for giving me the courage. What happens now? Now, Xander said, taking her hand, we find out if what we felt this weekend can survive in the real world. And if it can't, then at least we'll know we tried. He squeezed her fingers gently. Will you let me take you to dinner? A real dinner? At a normal restaurant where we can be ourselves? Scarlett studied his face. The genuine hope there. The vulnerability that money couldn't buy or fake. She thought about her small apartment, her student loans, her ordinary life that suddenly felt extraordinary because he wanted to be part of it. "I know a great coffee shop," she said finally. "The owner's a little crazy, but the espresso machine is finally working again." "It's a date," Xander said, and when he smiled, Scarlett realized that sometimes the best love stories began exactly where the lies ended. 6 months later, the Meridian Gallery, newly reopened under different management, hosted a showing featuring the work of an emerging artist named Scarlett Chen. The pieces were beautiful, honest, full of light and shadow, and truth. At the opening, a handsome man in an expensive suit stood proudly beside each painting, telling anyone who would listen about the incredibly talented woman who had changed his life. And if occasionally someone asked how they met, he would smile and say, "It's a funny story." It all started with a cup of coffee and the worst pickup line in Manhattan history. Eleanor Blackstone eventually came around, though it took nearly a year and the realization that Scarlett's influence had made her son happier than she'd ever seen him. Brittany married a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley and claimed it had been her plan all along. But that's a different story. This one ends with two people who learned that the best relationships aren't built on contracts or arrangements or family expectations. They're built on honesty, laughter, and the courage to love someone exactly as they are, even if they do happen to serve excellent coffee.